The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you all for joining. Really appreciative. Hope you all find the webinar worthwhile. One quick thing to mention, everyone is on mute, so if you do have any questions, just pop it in the Q&A tab and we will go through those at the end of the call. So on the call, there's myself, James Holland. I'm one of the account directors here from Fortem. We also have Mark and we also have Simon from Scalable. Mark, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Davro. I'm the Chief Technology and Product Officer for Scalable Software.
Okay. Simon, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, morning everybody. I'm Simon Croydon. I run solutions consultancy and technical services for Scalable Software.
Okay, that's great. So Mark has control of this slide, just so we don't need to keep bouncing through people's PCs. So if you do hear me say, Mark, can we go to the next slide? That's the reason. I don't have too many slides. That made sense. So with the current climate, and the current economic outlook and business continuity and support for new working practices means organisations need to innovate faster and be digitally agile to stay competitive. IT budgets, as always, are constantly under pressure, and even more so now. IT teams are looking to balance expenditure, funding innovation and digital transformation projects while protecting against uncertainty by implementing cost savings. In all organisations, there is usually an opportunity for rationalising software, hardware, assets, both physically and virtually, to drive savings. There will undoubtedly be opportunities to eliminate unused, underutilised and duplicated software and IT assets. To optimise cost and achieve the greatest saving possible, organisations need to secure accurate, granular assets and usage intelligence. Understanding what license rights the organisations have purchased and how many instances of software are deployed on what type of devices, that's only part of the picture. This webinar will detail how usage of intelligence can be used to find sizable cost savings and build a foundation of feasibility that will provide ongoing support for IT cost management and government. The session will provide guidance on where to look first for quick impact, with a focus on cost optimization across enterprise applications, SaaS and hybrid cloud. Participants will be able to see asset vision in action to see how with a couple of clicks, IT teams can survey the entire estate and discover how to make smart decisions about rationalizing software assets and delivering software savings. So Mark, if you can go to the next slide for me, we'll have a quick look through the agenda. So first off, introduction to Fortem, because I know a lot of you guys have only briefly spoke to myself or Paul Thorpe, so we'll go through who's Fortem. Then it'll be an introduction into IT asset management, software asset management and cost optimization, and that will be Mark delivering that part. And then we'll move to Simon, who will go through asset vision demonstration and the benefits of intelligent usage metering. And then finally, we'll have the questions that you guys have asked, and we'll go through that at the end. Hopefully it won't be too long, so it should be a nice short session, because I'm sure all of you guys have been bored out of your brains with webinars by now. So Mark, if you could pop to the next slide for me, please. So Fortem, who are we? Fortem, we are an IT UK value-added reseller specialising in innovative and disruptive technologies in areas such as infrastructure, cloud services and cybersecurity. We have offices in London, Birmingham and British Columbia in Canada. Our goal is to help organisations stay ahead of their competition, improve efficiency, save money, and we achieve this by capitalising on our agility and reputation to be first to market with great new products and services that can really make a difference and benefit to companies. We also do the mainstream IT, such as licensing, end user devices, infrastructure, support services and cloud services. We are partnered with the mainstream vendors such as HPE, Dell, Nutanix, and Microsoft, but maybe that might be a better discussion for a webinar in the future. So that is a very, very quick, brief overview of Fortem, because I know the main subject today is all around scalable and IT asset management. But I thought it'd be good for us to just to show you guys some of the companies that we work with. So Mark, if you could just pop to the next slide for me, please. So as you can see, we're very fortunate to have customers that are both in public and private sector, and with some very notable names up there, such as Waterstone, Cineworld, Charles Russell, Merseyrail, etc. So I'll leave that in there for a couple of seconds just for you guys to have a quick look. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass it over to Mark. Like I say, very quick whistle stop tour of Fortem, as the main reason is for IT asset management, and that's why you're all here. So Mark, if you want to go to the next slide,
Thanks,
and
James.
I will let you take over.
Great stuff. Thanks, James. So as James mentioned, I'm going to give a brief overview, an introduction to ITAM, SAM, and cost optimization. And then I'll hand over to Simon, who's going to give you a demo of Asset Vision, our ITAM platform. So I'm going to start here. Some of you may have seen similar slides and statistics elsewhere, but I think it's always good to start the session with a quick overview of why an ITAM program is important and what the reality of asset management in the enterprise looks like. And there are some fairly significant statistics on this page that are worth calling out. So we can see that 30% of assets in the enterprise, laptops, mobiles, servers, etc., are lost, and the business has no idea where they are. And in part, that's because 56% of companies only go looking for their hardware once a year. Some of them, in fact, only do it every 5 years. And the impact of that is significant. I mean, here's just one example. On average, a nurse spends 21 minutes of every hour looking for equipment that he or she needs to use. And the impact of that on their role, efficacy, and patient care is enormous. And 76% of organizations admit to over-licensing their software because they don't have a reliable SAM program and they're afraid of an audit. So they buy more than they need or simply give in to vendor demands in order to err on the side of caution. And those are significant numbers and costs associated with those. But for those companies that do put in place an effective ITAM program, the savings and efficiencies are extensive. On average, organizations can save around 30% on software spend. So for some organizations, that literally translates into tens of millions of pounds a year saved. And ITAM can help you cut contract costs and better manage your vendors by between 25 and 50%. Again, that translates into significant pound values. So what are the main challenges faced by ops teams that drive the need for an ITAM program in the first place? And here we have 7 of the main drivers behind this. So firstly, and I'm sure everyone's heard this one before, you can't manage what you don't know you have. It's the first and most important step in any successful ITAM program: discovery, inventory, and logging all the assets in your estate. If you don't have a reliable, consistently updated record of assets, then you'll fail to realize any of the benefits of ITAM. Secondly, you can't control software spend and optimize usage without ITAM. Without that record of what's out there, and importantly, how it's being used, you can't do things like reharvest licenses. You'll continue to pay for things that people aren't using, and you certainly won't be able to negotiate your vendor true-ups from a position of strength. You'll almost certainly end up overpaying. There's no single version of the truth in the estate that users can turn to, and that's not much better than no record at all. Fourthly, you can't reduce your security, financial, and reputational risk without an ITAM program, not least of which because you have no idea where up to 30% of your assets are, in the hands of whom, and with what data on them. 5, your executive-sponsored programs aimed at reducing cost may actually end up costing you money, which is really the reverse of what you want. and you have no data to drive more efficient contract negotiations with hardware software vendors, and as a result you end up in a cycle of uncontrolled renewal activity. And lastly, and certainly something probably most people will be familiar with, at some point you end up unprepared for the inevitable software vendor audit when it hits, and it invariably will. And these all directly have a cost, productivity and security impact on your organization. So you need to be able to answer the following key business questions. What do you have? Where is it now? Both the physical asset and the licenses. Who are they assigned to? Who owns that license? Because often they're not the same person or entity, and it's important to be able to understand that. How extensively are your licensable applications being used? You can't capitalize on opportunities to make smart software management decisions, whether that's reharvesting software, downgrading licenses, or changing license type, or moving to a SaaS model. You can't make any of those smart software decisions without understanding how an application is being used. You need to understand the utilization of your IT assets. Are they on the brink of running out of memory or disk space? Or are they massively over-provisioned, such that you're spending extensive amounts of money on something that could be downsized and save you significant amounts of money? Think about SQL Server costs and opportunities to rationalize a SQL estate, or even cloud environments that are maybe running always on IaaS servers, and perhaps they don't need to be always on, or could be downsized according to usage and need and capacity. You need to understand how applications are performing and the spread across the estate, so you can identify opportunities to rationalize. Rationalization results in fewer vendors and applications to support and manage, and gives you more effective negotiating and buying power. And all these data points cumulatively help you understand what your assets are actually costing you. So there are lots of reasons why an organization may be incurring excess cost, and here are just a few examples that most enterprise organizations will be able to relate to. Perhaps not all, but certainly some of these. And these things can easily add up to vast sums of wasted or ineffectively spent money. And I'll just draw attention to the statement at the bottom that, according to analysts, up to 33% of software deployed could be reclaimed. So if you translate that number alone to a proportion of your own software spend, you'll see that those are some significant values. So how can Scalable help with all of this? Well, our Asset Vision platform helps address all of those key questions that I highlighted earlier, and helps you identify both immediate cost-saving initiatives as well as help manage ongoing cost efficiency programs. The platform provides you a complete discovery and inventory service across all of your environments, as well as deep insights into how your assets are being used. We can show you who is using what, from where, how intensively, and for how long. So going beyond the level of detail of simply when did you last open an application, which most vendors will be familiar with, but being able to tell you how long was a user actually interacting with that application. And using that data, you can then prioritize actions that will yield fast returns. For example, looking at reducing software and SaaS costs. This includes helping identify where you can stop paying for subscription services that you're not using, or perhaps right-sizing those subscription agreements so users are correctly aligned to the license type that they need. Or maybe stop paying for those subscription services at all, and help you right-size your vendor contracts. And by focusing on right-sizing activities on your high-value and high-cost applications, you can realize significant savings in a very short space of time. We can also help you align usage to the right license tier for an application. Are you using all the features, for example, that make up an advanced and more expensive license, or could you get away with only using a standard license? And the example that people often quote is Office 365 and the various tiers of licensing. A lot of organizations will arbitrarily buy Office E5 licenses when in fact they could probably get away with E3 or even lower for some of their user base. So could you make do with a different license type, or going one step further, could you use in fact a read-only and non-licensable version of a product entirely? So we can help you identify opportunities to rationalize applications or services so that you only have one to manage. This reduces support costs and allows you to negotiate better deals and reduces your security risk. And we can help identify infrastructure cost reduction opportunities too, so you can more effectively manage your endpoint, data center, and cloud environments. Just a few examples on the page here of how we can help in this area include helping identify virtual machines that are still alive but either no longer in use or significantly over-provisioned resource-wise for jobs that they need to do. So giving you a reclaim ability of up to 10% of your assets on average. And we can provide data on workloads that help reduce hybrid cloud spend. For example, leveraging power schedules and right-sizing or decommissioning workloads where appropriate. And these are just some of the areas in which we can help with both cost savings and optimization strategies. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Simon, who will now give you a demo of the platform and show you some of these things in action. Okay, Simon, that's over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to make sure that I bring the right monitor up. There we go. Hopefully you can see a slightly aging photo of me. So can you see that, Mark? Just to
yes, I can. Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay, I think everyone's been patient with looking at PowerPoint slides and all of the rest of it, so I will whiz through mine very quickly and get onto some product for you. So that's me. Where is my control? Oh, there we are. Good stuff. So some of the detail of how Asset Vision starts working towards helping you achieve some of those goals, reach some of those targets that that Mark's been talking about just now. So very importantly, a single view across your estate. You really don't want to be saying, you know, this is the system I use for this type of device. This is the system I use for the data center. This is the one I use for workstations. This is the one I use for my Azure assets. Making sure that we've got this single pane of glass view is very important to us and very important to our customers. Speed to value, I suppose, is really this next point. Insights in days rather than weeks. It's we host inside the cloud, typically inside AWS, which means that the complex infrastructure is sort of already provisioned and managed by us, and effectively we're talking about either setting up some scans or deploying some agents to start getting data in and start getting you in a position to start actioning that. So typically our rollouts can be done as quickly as you can roll out agents, or as quickly as we can approve carrying out a scan on a given building or similar. And then importantly, the data that comes back. So granular usage information is really one of the key elements of Asset Vision. An accurate discovery of the estate, accurate inventory, of course, is important, but this is really the stuff that lets us start hanging very fast ROI off the back of it. And what we're doing is, for any application that gets used inside the estate, what we're looking to do is measure actual user interaction with it, human interaction with applications. So not just the fact that it's installed, although obviously it will tell you that, not just the fact that it's been updated or whatever, and the point version, but all of that's useful information as well, but some real detailed metrics that we can then report off the back of. So we think of it as being these 5 additional data points that you are likely not to have seen from elsewhere. So who has used this application when we've started it up? So if I've got a copy of PowerPoint that started up, who's used it? Who's the logged in user at the time? absolutely a username. We could potentially tie that into an HR system or Active Directory and say, yep, there's their full name, there's their desk location, whatever other information is there to be integrated. What's the software that's in use? Microsoft Word in the example here, but we need to know the edition, the version. We need to know so that we can know what type of license we need to have coverage for to ensure that we're running this in a legal and compliant manner. Where has it been run from? Could be their laptop, could be a thin client, could be a home edition or something like that. And then we get into intensity of usage. How long has it been used for? 32 minutes. How intensively? 557 keystrokes. So I'll talk about these two slightly separately. The amount of time, I often talk about this as being a stopwatch effect. So if I start up PowerPoint in the morning, I work for 10 minutes on some slides, and then I pop it into the background. The stopwatch effectively stops when I pop it into the background. The application is still running. My stopwatch has stopped. I might then work in my browser, in Outlook for a couple of hours, bring it back in and work on it for 20 minutes in the middle of the day, repeat the same pattern, do another 10 minutes at the end of the day. So in that example, PowerPoint has been open for 8 hours, but I don't want to see that it's been in use for 8 hours because it really hasn't. What I want to know is that it was in use for 40 minutes. And that's the information that Asset Vision rolls up and collects through this process. The intensity of usage, the keystrokes, I often talk about this as being key strikes because we're not at any level measuring, we're not recording which keys are pressed, we're just counting the keys, counting the number of clicks effectively. What this lets us do is things like read-only analysis. So we can say, if I have a user of Microsoft Visio, for example, quite a common one to target, show me all of the users who have a bit of usage, possibly they have never have more than 10 minutes in a day and never go over.
Sorry to quickly stop you there. I've just had a message from Paul Forbes. Apparently some of the listeners are having audio issues and they can't hear properly.
Can you hear me okay?
I hear you okay.
I can hear you okay, Simon.
Yeah, so I think, I will speak up a little bit more, but it sounds like it's clear elsewhere, so it could be communication problems around their end. All I think I can really recommend at the moment is that we will, I believe, make a link to this available afterwards.
Sure.
Okay. And we'll absolutely make sure that the audio is crystal clear on that. So I think with all of the thunderstorms and stuff around at the moment, I know there's various power and comms issues happening around, but I will just try and speak up and go a little bit more slowly for the moment.
Sure. Apologies for interrupting.
No problem. Yeah, so read-only usage. And what we can do is we could say, right, here is a pattern of usage with a low number of keystrokes that makes us, that lets us know that this Visio user could potentially have the free Visio viewer instead. So rather than this piece of software that costs 400 quid, we'll give them a free viewer because all they're doing is looking at other people's content and consuming it. It's important that we let them do that, but they don't need the full product. Agentless discovery, normalization. I'll talk about normalization in a minute, so I want to sort of move off this slide and actually show you some product. Web application monitoring, very important. I'll show you in product as well. Software as a service inventory ties into that. Usage tracking, and we'll touch on dependency mapping as well, which is really, we won't get into a huge amount of detail in this demo, but it's about looking at the way that services inside your data center or outside your data center interact with other services. So we can kind of start building up that map of which systems and services are important or critical to which other systems and services and who the consumers are. Great. Okay, let me flip over to something that's not a PowerPoint slide. I'm sure everybody will celebrate that. And here we go. So this is Asset Vision. This is what a typical user will see. In fact, this is the front page that comes out by default, but everything is customizable. So what we often end up doing is starting from this as a template, and then either we will work with customers or customers will jump in and edit themselves and they might build up a sort of switchboard type view like this that I often use for demonstration. The reason I lay it out like this is just because it takes us over to value and over to cost on the far side, and showing a return on investment is obviously, you know, critical in the short medium term, and I think we know from what Mark was telling us that in the medium long term, really having IT asset management under control and understanding what's there and having your arms around it is where the real longer term value comes from. So if I have a quick jump into here, inventory information. So we'll gather this from the agent or agentlessly. It can be presented in various ways. You'll see we've sort of got a breakdown of servers here, you know, locations, as you'd expect. And workstations, what I'll do is jump into a single workstation just to give us a view, a sort of detail view. So you'll see we'll end up, as we dive through nice charts, inevitably we get down to the data. And this tends to be a sort of different people want different things out of information coming back. We make sure that there are lots of, you know, bright colors, easily consumable information, so that we can create management reporting that's going to be effective and actually looked at. But ultimately, if we're looking at an analyst inside your business who wants to go and check on the detail of something, they need to get down to this detail level as soon as possible. So we kind of operate on a 2 clicks to the raw data sort of premise a lot of the time. So I won't go through all of these, but sort of hardware information, just showing that sort of everything that you would expect is picked up. We gather this information in much the same way that anybody else does. It's WMI querying and taking a look at registry on machines. So everything's there that you would expect to be. Monitors, you know, physical disk, logical disk setup, the memory setup, the processors, and all of the rest of it. 2 areas that I just want to call out here, which will be a little bit different from what you've seen before, I think. One of them is warranty. So we have the advantage that because your database is stored in AWS, we can take information on serial numbers, service tags, and where vendors publish their warranty information publicly, which most of them do, certainly, you know, Dell, HP, Toshiba, Lenovo, we can pull back that publicly available warranty information and tie it to your devices. So it means I can say, well, here are the warranties that belong to this service tag for this machine. For an individual machine, that can be useful. Where it comes into its own is really in being able to very simply chart out where your warranty expirations are by month, by quarter, by year. You know, if we know that we've got 40% of our machines have a warranty that expires in Q3 this year, that's important information that we may shape decisions that we make. And then discovered software. So this is very important in terms of normalization. You'll have seen that mentioned on one of my slides just now, because any of you who've looked at the output of a standard inventory tool before know that you know they are very good at telling you exactly what the Windows machine in this example has installed on it, but that will just relate to the package that was used to install it. So it's not necessarily uniform across the board. So Adobe, for example, will use different descriptions for their manufacturer name as time progresses. And, you know, we all have versions going back several years for a lot of these things. There will even be different descriptions for different versions of software that make it difficult to tie them together. So I think Adobe is always a great example because they will have, I think it's something like 17 or 18 different descriptions of their own name. You know, Adobe Inc. Dot, Adobe, comma, Inc. Dot, Adobe Incorporated, US Limited. It's you know, it's all over the place. So rationalizing that down to what we know is a unique publisher, helps us out to start with, and then doing the same thing with the software names. So effectively what we're doing is taking this raw information and saying, well, what you've got here is you've got Microsoft Corporation, Internet Explorer 9, or you know, FileZilla Client 3, Chrome 42. This allows us to get them down into rational, licensable units, makes that element of ITAM a lot easier as well, and just streamlines the reporting. So it's a huge thing. Anyone who's worked with, for example, SCCM inventory data will know that the discrepancies across what seems to be the same software just make it such a headache. So this is a service that Scalable run in-house. We have an extremely large software catalog of several million entries in it now. We have dedicated employees who work for the company and research software as new software comes in. We find there's less and less of that as we sort of expand our user base, if you like, because we've almost got this crowdsourcing approach. Everywhere that if we've seen a piece of software in customer X, that's going to be available for normalization for you. What it lets us do is move down from saying, well, here is all of the raw information and the normalization information for this software. And this is what it comes down to, 194 down from 231. I may then also say, well, actually, I'm only interested in the ones that are licensable. And then suddenly I'm down to 9 items of software on a system that I am concerned about, versus 231 from the raw list. So it's kind of moving down and making problems a solvable size, I think is the way I would represent this. Okay, let me come back to this view here. You'll see some information here that I won't jump into today about hypervisors, SQL Server instances. This is more on the data center side. And there's a lot we can do there. And I mentioned dependency mapping as well. And that kind of falls into this whole area. But as far as detailed inventory of your VMware ESX estate, yep, absolutely. We'll monitor vCenters, build out that virtual environment, show physical, so the host-guest relationships for those systems, and then add in SQL Server information potentially, or Oracle information, to say, this is the number of instances and the additions of those instances that you've got running on this physical hardware, which anyone who's had to deal with SQL Server licensing will know is tremendously important. Okay, if I jump back over to usage data, I spoke about those 5 data points before, and this is sort of the raw view of it. So I won't sort of belabor the point by going over it too much again, but this is kind of what we come down to: who's used it, where's it used from, what's the application, how much has it been used, and this is a record for a given day. We can go down to the level and see, this usage happened between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock if we need to. Typically, we want to sort of be looking at the macro rather than the micro. So, number of times started is an additional data point as well. Once we have this information across all of our systems for a given amount of time, and just to reassure you, it's most of the hard work is done by the agent that's deployed in this case. So this agent sits very quietly on the machine, sends data back once a day in the order of about 100K a day per machine. That's then rolled up on the server at our end, and then can be reported on in various ways. One of the ways that we find initially people look to get a very fast sort of turnaround on their investment and achieve that return is by looking at these kind of sort of low-hanging fruit applications. The ones that we know we don't have installed on every system in the environment, and we know that they have a cost that may be of some significance or another. So yeah, Photoshop's a good example. A lot of the Adobe products are. Project and Visio are always key ones. Microsoft Project is always a good example, because we will get a call from a user, or a user will ask for something through the provisioning portal. I've been sent a Microsoft Project file, therefore I need Microsoft Project. Fine, maybe that happens. They get this £300-400 piece of software. They open up the project plan, they print a copy off, stick it above their desk, and that's it. Unless you've got the corresponding process that makes sure that you're checking whether they're actually using it or not, whether they're getting value out of your investment, and then takes it away again afterwards, you're potentially just going to end up building up and up and up on those licenses rather than effectively managing them through a sort of almost a sort of reduce, reuse, recycle approach. Use it or lose it is the way we often talk about it, and sort of successfully implementing those processes is something Asset Vision does extremely well. And as soon as businesses that we work with start acting on them, the savings sort of mount up very quickly on those. You can see here, this is obviously demonstration data, but in this instance, Project Professional, we've got almost 1,100 that are metered, as in as an agent, we're looking at what's going on. And during the period I'm reporting on, which I think is 60 days in this example, 491 are unused. So we've done a quick calculation based on the list pricing there to say, right, and that's a potential unused software cost of $400,000. All of these figures where we start putting financials into it obviously can be customized to make sure that we're using your figures rather than list prices, because obviously that's going to be more appropriate, and none of you will be paying list price, I'm sure. So it's kind of implementing that, getting that in place tends to be one of the first focuses of Asset Vision implementation that we do, because paying for yourself, effectively sort of paying for yourself several times over is often the case, is a very good way to sort of get your ITAM tool in the good column, so to speak. So we can also tie that into that web and SaaS applications, which I mentioned before. So the only difference really on these for us to keep in mind is that our agent will automatically monitor installed applications, so traditionally installed applications. The only difference with web applications is that we don't have any desire to monitor all web traffic, and people don't really want us to monitor all web traffic through this agent. It throws you into all sorts of security and compliance loopholes. So we just have to add definitions. So we have browser extensions for Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer that will allow us to collect exactly the same usage information that we'll get from an installed app. So minutes in use, when it's been used, number of key strikes, all the rest of it. But we just need to make a quick definition and say what we're looking for. So lots of these we'll add out of the box, Office 365 and so on. We know exactly what those look like. But I might want to track Salesforce, for example, and setting a definition for that could be as simple as saying, I want to track, Salesforce, anything that matches www.salesforce.com, track usage of. So it's not a particularly onerous task. We just need to make sure that we're setting our definitions up, and that tends to be part of our initial implementation, the conversation that we have with people. But it allows us critically to pull this information about web delivered applications into the same pane of glass as our more traditionally installed apps. Building up from there, one use case that came out of that relatively recently was, I think I've got a report in here, was where we're looking at people moving to Chromebooks. So they said, look, we've got the opportunity to move people from these laptops that cost us 1,500 quid a go to Chromebooks, which cost us 300 quid a go. But in order to do that, all of the applications that they use must be available to run inside Chromos. And we've got the data to make that add up. The only thing that we need to add in is, which of your in-house applications can run via a browser or have a specific Chromos version. It lets us build up this type of reporting where we say, okay, look, we're looking at approximately 2,000 machines here. 906 of them are ready to go, 956 are not. And you're never going to sort of get to a point where everyone, well, not immediately get to a point where everybody can run everything via a browser. We're always going to have people using AutoCAD and so on who are going to probably want a big bulky workstation, but starting to make steps in that direction has been something we've been helping customers with for some time. Just to mention the cloud migration side of things and cloud generally, we consider AWS, Azure, Google Cloud to really be the difference is that, as well as looking at operating systems and software and services and so on, we'll also gather via the AWS or Azure APIs information on the configuration aspects specific to that cloud provider. So, you know, the instance types, potentially the costs, certainly the regions and the zones that they're installed in, and the disk setup and so on, and tie that to the device, just to give that, allow that extra level of management, make sure that we're kind of considering all of the data that we need to consider. Also, inside the tool is cloud migration, a sort of a relatively basic lift and shift cloud migration tooling, which lets us say, I've got these servers running internally at the moment. You know, this one has 4 CPUs, 32 gig of RAM, and it sort of, you know, this is the service it's running. What would that cost me if I ran it inside AWS? And I chose the option to do it on over a 1-year reserved term, and the, you know, the various options are in there for you to choose. We'll pull that out and we'll say, look, you know, this is what, you know, that server looks like an M1X large inside an AWS environment, or Azure in this case, standard A1v2. We've also got the option to gather some performance data from those systems and suggest a performance target instead. So while we might have this system that in on-premise runs 4 CPUs and 32 gig of RAM, possibly it never goes above 20% CPU usage. So our recommendation might then be, well, you can get away with a smaller unit when you move it into the cloud, and potentially attract even more savings. Excellent. So I've used most of my time, so I'm just going to very quickly gloss over a couple of these things here that you might have noticed. Unused machine value is just one of these simple ideas that if no software has been used on a system, then the machine isn't being used, is really what we can come down to. And the larger the organization, the more of these we tend to see, where a system has, typically a workstation, has just been left in a corner, possibly in a sort of hot desking or a kiosk type area. It's just not getting used. So let's pick it up and bring it back. We've recovered then the hardware costs of that disuse and all of the software on it. So it's a sort of a double bubble type approach. And then you'll see some information on there on audit exposure, where we can start looking at license values and do that simple count of, you know, what is our installed base of applications requiring a license and how many licenses have we got. You know, pretty straightforward stuff. So not in-depth SAM analysis push button, but giving a real sort of solid overview of what the SAM position is. Great, let me jump back to my slides quickly. There we go. So I just wanted to spend a minute now. I'll pop this slide up in much the same way that Fortem did. These are sort of typically long-term dedicated customers of ours that we've been working with for several years now. Inside any given sector, it's generally relatively straightforward for us to find a friendly customer that will give a reference. And I think the reason for that is probably our focus on customer support and keeping happy customers. Some general points, sort of from the Y asset vision point of view. The after-sales support, you can see, is one of the points there. 98% plus CSAT rating, which, if you're interested in those sorts of things, is I'm told very good, and means that my support team are lauded throughout the business. But really, the focus is making sure that we listen to the pain points that customers are telling us about, and we help them tide them over. You know, Asset Vision is a very flexible, capable tool, and we're always looking for new use cases. Some of the best use cases that we have out there that we help customers with come from questions that have been asked by other customers in the community. And that's a really nice way for us to do it. Value is a question that we always have to come down to. We've got this figure, $15 per device identify, upwards of $60 in savings. We talk about this one during the proof of concept process and all of the rest of it, but generally it works out typically a lot better than that. I mean, it's very common for us to show a return of something like 4 to 8 times in the first year, and it's difficult to put a finger on because some people have already started to manage their environment and some people are just in a complete mess. So but there are always savings to be had. In terms of total cost of ownership, obviously we handle the infrastructure side, and it can just be as simple as deploying agents. I've started a proof of concept with a customer this week, and the entire setup so far, beyond sort of exchange of NDAs and that sort of thing, has been, here is your secure customized agent package. Great, I'm going to use SCCM to drop that onto 100 machines. Job done. Time to value, actionable data delivered as little as 60 days. This really depends on how we consider, when we consider software to be unused. So it could be that we say, for some titles, if you haven't used it for a month, I'm going to remove it. For some, we might say, really, it's 90 days because they're going to use it, once a quarter or something like that. But it really depends. It's the customer choice. How aggressive do we want to be about this? What's our tolerance for having an occasional removal of something that somebody then we have to reinstall it the next day because they use it on day 62 every 62 days. After sales support I've spoken about, and the operational expertise inside the business. We've been doing this for a while. We've been growing the business. We've got a very most of our staff have been with us a long time. We don't really have a high turnover on that front. So generally, you'll find that anybody you talk to is already an expert, which is a great thing. Okay, we're coming up to 11:20. I don't know if you've had any
Thanks,
questions submitted, Pete.
Yeah, we've had a couple come in, which I can I can read out, and then Pete will let us know if we've had any more. So, Simon, I'll read these questions out. I'll give a quick answer. You may want to garnish them with some more information. So, the first question that we had come in was, and I'll read this out verbatim: with the current way of working at home, how does Asset Vision gain usage if devices aren't hitting the network unless a VPN connection or similar? So the easy answer to that is that for the usage data, the Asset Vision agent would need to be installed on the endpoint. So it's not dependent upon the device being connected to the network. If you wanted to do inventory and discovery agentlessly, then you would you would need to be on a VPN or similar, but you wouldn't get the granular level of usage data that Simon's been talking about and that I mentioned without the agent. The agent is a dependency for getting up that level of detail. And then the second question that we had come in, and Simon, again, you may have some additional value to this, is what sort of bandwidth utilization do you observe on larger IT enterprise estates reporting back into your platform, i.e. 10,000 endpoints? I.e. will clients report in at different intervals, or can this solution also be deployed on premise? So there's a couple of answers to that. For the endpoints, the agents actually report directly back to our cloud receiver, should we call it. So they post the data directly up to the cloud, and our cloud solution can queue those accordingly. So it doesn't actually go internally through the network and then come back out. They all go out individually, and we queue them and collect them. And we can do this successfully. One of our larger clients is reporting back somewhere in the region of about just under 300,000 endpoints, and that works without any significant trouble. For agentless discovery, particularly in the data center, it works ever so slightly differently, or for the endpoint, in fact. and there is a locally installed device, a locally installed, we call it a pad, and it's just an application that sits internally and can run on any suitable server, and that does have the concept of being able to collect the data at different intervals. So you have complete configuration control over setting IP ranges or subnets that are collected at different intervals and report back at different times, so as not to potentially put any undue pressure on the network. And many of our clients work that way. Simon, anything I missed out on that you want to add?
No, I think that's a really good summary, and it's I think flexibility is the key thing, and also it's bandwidth utilization is always a hot topic, and in fact, you know, particularly since we've had so many people working from home, and a lot of businesses have had to sort of rapidly adopt or increase sort of you know, VPN or remote working technologies.
Yeah.
So we find ourselves under the microscope for that quite a lot, and we're always happy to engage with people in helping to benchmark what's going on. But you know, we're extremely conservative on bandwidth usage, definitely.
Thanks, Simon. And our web server accepts a few hundred simultaneous connections, and those agents will try asynchronously until they get a connection, and all of that is configurable. So you have total control over how that works. So I'll just refer back to Pete to ask if there are any other questions, because unfortunately I can't see them directly. So did we have any others come in, Pete?
We've got a couple of others. There's one here about dependency mapping. So dependency mapping can mean so many different things. What are you really talking about? So I don't know, perhaps Simon, if you want to take that one. Simon, can you hear me?
I can. Sorry, I'd thoughtfully muted myself and then thoughtfully didn't unmute myself. Yeah. So yeah, the dependency mapping that we're doing is at a pretty low level, so per endpoint, per effectively server or IP address generally, and we will look at specifically the ports and services that are coming out across those IPs. So it builds us up quite a detailed picture to start with of, you know, for example, you know, this web server is transmitting information on port 443, and we can see what that's going, and we can see all of the endpoints that are consuming that information, which can of course work out to quite a big number. We might also see DNS traffic going out on another port. The trick really comes from turning that into something reportable, because we want to filter out a lot of the noise. There's an awful lot of noise. So it's that low level of dependency mapping, and what we will typically do is work to a use case that a customer is attempting to get to. So an example might be, I need to know everybody who consumes information from this Oracle server, and we will build effectively a report out of the dependency mapping information that zeroes in on that information, takes the noise out, and lets you sort of analyze that service specifically.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon. Got one last question. You made it clear that understanding usage is critical, but do you really see many IT organizations doing it effectively, especially to the scope that you've indicated here? So I don't know, perhaps Mark, you want to pick that up? Or?
Interesting. Oh, sorry, yeah. I'll tell you what, I've started talking, so I'll let Mark come on to it. I was just going to give a very specific example of, we've got the very large organization that Mark mentioned has, you know, sort of 300,000 devices worldwide, and what they've done is really focused very early in their implementation, and we've been in there sort of three and a bit years now, but on saying, you know, we're going to target, because of the scale that we're working at, we are going to target half a dozen applications at a time, and we're going to attack those. Then they move into the pot where we're actively monitoring them, and then we attack the next 6, just because of the number of analysts that they've got sort of processing and kicking off the uninstalls and all the rest of it. And the savings have been enormous, certainly much more than 4 times, more like sort of 8 or 10 in their case. And then we tend to then move on to oh my goodness, now I can carry out all of these other ITAM functions, and they effectively, they think of them as being free because they've already paid for it with the software reclamation. But that was just my point. I don't know if Mark has additions.
Yeah, no, I was just going to give a slightly more general response. You know, I think historically, people are, particularly in ITAM, people are used to running reports that go something along the lines of show me everything that hasn't been used in the last 90 days, and then making an assumption that that's unused software that can be reharvested. I think what we're seeing a lot now, and one of the reasons a lot of customers approach us is because they need, and they recognize that they need more than that, because actually it's not always that black and white, and not opening something for 90 days doesn't necessarily indicate that you don't necessarily still need something. Perhaps you produce quarterly reports and you need that product to be able to do something. And conversely, even when you do open something within 90 days, that's not necessarily the full picture. Perhaps you're opening it, but there are other things that you could be using to do that job instead, or actually based on what you're doing when you do open it, you could have a read-only copy, or you could be downgraded from an advanced license to a lower level license. So I think there's a recognition now that usage is much more than just has it been opened or has it not been opened. And so we're getting a lot of interest in people that want that level of detail. I think there are still a lot of organizations out there that take a very black and white approach to it, and they're definitely missing out on opportunities to make smarter savings and optimization decisions. So we are seeing more people realizing that and coming around to that way of thinking, but I definitely think there's a huge scope for more organizations to be smarter about how they approach that. Did we have any others, Pete, or I'm aware that we're reaching the end of the time?
Thanks very much, Mark. No, there are no more questions. So I guess at this point we hand back to James for any closing comment. James.
Yeah, okay, no, that's great. First of all, Mark, Pete, Simon, thank you for delivering this webinar. It was great to have another look at Scalable, and also thank you for everyone that joined in and watched the webinar. If there are any questions off the back of this, please feel free to reach out to myself or the other guys. My email address is james.holland@fortem-it.com. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We will send a link out to the video so you can re-watch, especially to the people who was having audio issues. Well, I know we're approaching 11:30 now. So thank you for joining, and we'll end it there.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, all.
Thanks.